We clearly can't win at anything because our climate and our lifestyles are so bad.
Will he ever be able to overtake Tom Brady? To say, no, there's no way, it would be stupid. Almost as stupid as saying, obviously, he'll get 10 Super Bowls.
I really love watching competitors, and I think that's what I love about Lindsey Vonn. She's so determined and so committed to her craft.
Brazil also has a chance to get a medal. I said that right, a skiing medal.
We've got a long way to go before we become a true sporting nation, because quite often we don't go to watch sport, we go to watch the sporting icons.
Hello and welcome to This Sporting Planet, your global view of sport. In London, I'm Natalie Sawyer.
From the USA, I'm Todd Harris.
And in Sydney, I'm Kate Allman.
As January turns to February, that means one thing here in the States, the Super Bowl. And we've got the preview you'll need coming up on this episode. Plus, over in Austria, it's the start of the Alpine World Ski Championships and the Asian Winter Games in China. Plus, is Indian men's cricket in crisis? Well, before we get into the Super Bowl itself, I just wanted to give you an insight into the kind of place and a kind of event this holds in American hearts, guys. Every year, it is the talk of turning the Monday after the Super Bowl literally into a national holiday. And it's everything from the pregame to the menu to what you're serving to where you're watching the game to the price of the tickets to who's doing the national anthem, who's performing at the halftime show. Oh yeah, and by the way, the commercials, which always take on a life of their own. People will be getting little sneak peeks of that just before they come out. And those commercials, by the way, I just got the news. They are selling for $7 million for a 30-second spot in the Super Bowl. So that's something else to talk about. Oh yeah, and then the game. So it is the big game, and it really does encompass so much more. It really is a national holiday. I think about Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve. Those are kind of the big ones. The 4th of July, obviously, in that group as well. And then there's that second tier. And I would say the Super Bowl is really probably more so or equivalent to Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, some of these other holidays that encompasses so much of the country and gets the collective attention of the nation that everyone has a side who they're picking. And if you're like me and your team hasn't been in the big game for decades, Minnesota Vikings, you still get involved in it and you cheer for one side or the other. But this year, it's a rematch from 2 years ago with the Philadelphia Eagles, who may have the best roster against maybe the best team in the Kansas City Chiefs, who are looking to pull off the three-peat. So I ask you, and we'll start with you, Kate, down under. What is the Super Bowl like down there, and how is it received?
Well, Todd, you mentioned a public holiday on a Monday. The Super Bowl in our time, real time, actually plays on a Monday. So many of us would love for it to be a public holiday. Unfortunately, it's not. American football has really grown here in recent years. I think streaming has had a massive part to do with it. We can access it so much easier for a fraction of the cost rather than having cable. And also people working from home. Just to give you an insight, in Australia, last year for the Super Bowl, 2.7 million viewers tuned in on our free-to-air channel. Now, that probably doesn't sound a lot to you guys, but we're a country of 26 million people, and that is a big number for us.
Yeah.
Our NRL Grand Final or AFL Grand Final would probably get only 1 million more, maybe 3 to 4 million for our biggest events of the year. And this is an event that's on Monday at 11 a.m. on a work day in another country. So that is an increase of 43%. And even the standard game viewership year on year increased about 70%. American football really is growing here. On a Monday, if you're going to watch the Super Bowl, you either have to make up a really good sickie excuse. The Super Bowl sickie is a pretty common thing. Or you'll go to a Super Bowl party and the bars open at 8 a.m. People are watching it in packed out bars. There's tickets for parties all over the place. It's absolutely massive. For me, it's a bit of a difficult one, actually. Like you, I've been supporting a team that hasn't had much luck lately, the 49ers. So I've watched a few Super Bowls down under and had some disappointing Monday afternoons. And you know what? It's actually like a lot harder when you've spent from 11 a.m. to about 3 p.m. watching a sport. You've taken off your day, you've maybe taken leave, and then to lose. and you've got to kind of just then go back to your work day. It's a real drop off, I tell you. What's it like for you, Natalie?
Well, you've come out with all those sort of facts and figures. I have similar facts and figures. It is growing every year, the NFL. The Super Bowl is one of the highlights for many fans over here. And we had 3.4 million people tuning in last year, which is a 48% increase on the previous Super Bowl. So we've talked about it on a few podcasts before, Todd. American football is, of all the sports, I think, that comes over from America, is the most popular. The baseball hasn't quite gripped us yet, even though there are international series matches that are staged here. But I think, the love of the NFL, you're seeing that all the time because of all the sellout matches that we have staged over here at Tottenham, at Wembley, at Twickenham before as well. The only issue we have, of course, is that time difference. That is the biggest issue, because it is in the middle of the night. So you've got to be committed if you want to stay up. And I must admit, I don't think I've ever seen a Super Bowl all the way through. I often try and get to at least the halftime entertainment, and then I'm often, at that point, I'm done. I'm so tired. I can't stay up much longer. But we'll have Super Bowl parties. There will be bars that will stay open specifically for it with their special licenses. It is a big thing. People want to see it. People love it over here. It's just that time difference is the biggest problem for us, Todd.
And I think you bring up a good point, Nat. It's more than just the games. There's a lot of people that literally tune in. They'll say, I'm just tuning in for the halftime show to see who sings the national anthem and the commercials, of course. And I think back how iconic, you think of Whitney Houston, what a career she had. And one of the things she's most popular for is the national anthem she sang at the Super Bowl. The commercials, they become a life of their own, because for the next couple of days, the news stories will talk about which one rated the highest, who did the best job, which ones were flops. Who spent $7 million on that 30 seconds of garbage? That's always a good one. And Kate, to your point, I love it. You show up what you call the Super Bowl flu, or as a term you might be related to, powder flu. When there's fresh snow and fresh powder, everyone feel a little under the weather, so I can't make it in quite yet.
Yeah, I've had that a few times. Yeah, I actually coming down with it. I've got a trip planned soon, so I'll have to figure that out.
But the other thing I should say is, I think they were saying, Todd, that 1 in 5 Brits now are NFL fans. So that goes to show the growth of it over here as well. And you do sort of wonder, when you're talking about eyes on the sport, we talked about it previously, didn't we, in one of our podcasts where we mentioned the Swift Mania. That clearly is adding to the occasion. And I wonder, do they do like an NFL bingo, where you have your bingo card and it'll be how many times a commentator says this or whatever?
There's a drinking game. You drink every time Taylor Swift is shown on camera.
Exactly.
And you also drink every time Patrick Mahomes gets a roughing the passer call, and you'll be blind by the end of it.
Exactly.
Well, there's definitely a lot of prop bets that go along with that, and that's just part of the whole Super Bowl extravaganza. As we said, Super Bowl 59 here in 2025, we'll see the Kansas City Chiefs face off with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think the Chiefs' run has been spectacular. They haven't dominated this year like they have in the past. They still win, but they're winning by closer margins, but they still find a way to get a win, and in the end, that's all that counts. The Philadelphia Eagles, though, great story there. It's a gritty city. They love their Eagles. They live and die by their Eagles. But the transformation of that team this year, because they've done such a great job of keeping people and having buy all in, the big missing piece was Saquon Barkley, who they got from the New York Giants, who I think for years and years are going to be kicking themselves for letting him go because he's such a generational player. How did the Giants do this year? 3-14. And now Saquon Barkley's off to his very first Super Bowl and really giving them a good chance of winning. So I think the playoffs were sensational. It's another tough break year for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, the Detroit Lions and my Minnesota Vikings, with massive regular season records, looked like they were the odds-on favorites, and they fizzled out. The Washington Commanders and their new quarterback, Jaden Daniels, that's another big story to go forward to. But in an earlier episode of This Sporting Planet, we heard from NFL Hall of Famer Dan Fouts. And we want to have a little bit more of that chat as we look ahead to Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. And Dan Fouts telling me why he thinks the Three-Peat would be so special.
Well, obviously the pressure of everybody coming after you and everybody getting your best shot. But, I have a problem with them saying nobody has ever done this before. Because the Green Bay Packers, before the Super Bowl, they were winning almost every year the NFL title. Well, the NFL title is the Super Bowl. And so you got to look back into the history of the game a little bit, back to the 60s, and see what the Green Bay Packers did and how dominant they were. That doesn't mean that the Chiefs aren't dominant and are going to be a possible three-peater. But let's give some credit where credit's due too.
No question about it. Bart Starr and the whole clan back there, they were phenomenal. This is a big year, obviously, for Patrick Mahomes. Do you see him surpassing Tom Brady? I mean, he's still in his 20s, and now he is going to his fifth or sixth Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think he's been able to overcome injuries too. I think that's as impressive as anything. He's had some ankle problems. He runs smart though, and he doesn't resist the pass rush that's inevitably going to take him down. So you see it, like a Josh Allen, he's going to fight for some meaningless yards at times because he's such a big, strong kid and he can't do it. So as far as, will he ever be able to overtake Tom Brady? That we'll have to wait and see, obviously. To say, no, there's no way would be stupid. Almost as stupid as saying, obviously, he'll get 10 Super Bowls.
Yeah. I'll put you on the spot on this just a little bit, but who do you like in this one? You're not a betting man, but if you had to pick a side, I initially was going Kansas City, but after watching Saquon Barkley, he seems to be such a difference maker, and the way A.J. Brown now just causes such havoc in the secondary, I'm starting to lean maybe Philadelphia.
Well, and Hurts looks really good, and he did a great job with his legs in the last game. So, you look at that, was it 49 points or 149, whatever they scored. That's a lot of points. And that's a lot of points against a playoff team. So I know the Commanders, they got behind early, and I think they got away from their game plan, which is pretty understandable. But Philadelphia can give you some problems. And you mentioned Barkley and Brown. Well, put Hurts in there too as the guy that, is the straw that, stirs the drink.
Obviously, Philadelphia's got such a great offensive line, which opens up the holes for Saquon Barkley, but their defensive line is pretty solid too. Do you think they can scheme a way to, I don't say contain, but to get Patrick Mahomes off his game where he can't throw those sidearm passes, where he doesn't get the passing lanes that he wants?
Well, it's all about containment. And you notice about Mahomes, when he scrambles out the right side of the pocket. So that left defensive end or the linebacker on that side has got to find a way to contain him. Once you start to run those games where the end goes inside and the tackle loops around, well, the tackle doesn't have any speed at all. Your fastest guy is your defensive ends there or your linebackers. So containing Mahomes in the pocket, number one, it will frustrate him a little bit because he likes the big play, likes the dramatic, and he makes most of those big plays, those dramatic plays outside of the pocket. And really the difference makers, whether he's completing a pass or whether he's running for the first down.
You had a pretty decent record, almost Mount 500 in your playoff career in the NFL over 15 seasons. What is it about the playoffs? And after such a long season with the NFL, now with an expanded season, where do you come up with the strength? I mean, everyone's hurt, everyone's kind of taped together, but how do they get to this last game? And you get the week off, and then it's the big hurdle. It's a long season.
Well, there's no question. And, you talk about guys, everybody's a little dinged up, obviously. But, so is the other team. And so pretty much the field is pretty level as far as how everybody is physically going into the game. But there's some of them about adrenaline that gets you fired up. Yeah, it should get you fired up for every game, but it's not always possible. But it is possible for the playoffs.
Yeah. You were able to call, I think, 2 Super Bowls in your broadcasting career. I remember the one in Atlanta with the big rainstorm that turned to ice and created havoc for everyone. What's the preparation like as opposed to when you're calling a regular NFL game as opposed to calling the Super Bowl?
Well, you hope it's not going to be that much different because every game is important. But obviously with the Super Bowl, you've got better comparison numbers to throw at people. You got a whole season of numbers to back up whatever statement you may want to make. The key thing is to keep those in mind as the game's going on and see how they play out and whether you can be considered a genius after the game or not. Probably not.
You've done quite a bit in the broadcasting booth. And what is it about the NFL, and you speak from someone who played 15 seasons, you're in the NFL Hall of Fame. It's recession proof. It's international. It's just the monster league that will not stop, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. What is it about the NFL do you think that draws in people not only in North America but around the world?
Well, it's really a good question. I mean, the owners are brilliant billionaires for a reason. Well, they're smart, okay, and they've done a good job of forming a club. The club being the National Football League, where they share revenues, they take care of each other. You don't see a lot of bickering. At least we don't. The PR machine is very smooth. And I think because the game is played just once a week, that it gives people, a chance to dissect Sunday's game and then look forward to next Sunday's game.
And that was just a small portion of my conversation with NFL Hall of Famer Dan Fouts. We thank him for his time. If you want to see more of that interview, the complete run of that interview, you can always go to our This Sporting Planet YouTube channel. All right, ladies, so now do you feel prepared? Now do you feel ready for the Super Bowl? And who do you like?
Oh, we're ready. I really like the Eagles. I think this might be the team that could possibly stop Patrick Mahomes. I hate betting against him, but like you guys said, and like Dan said in that interview, Saquon Barkley has changed their offense completely. The Giants were so silly to let go of him, and I know that the owner who said he wouldn't sleep if Saquon went over to Philadelphia, he hasn't slept since October. It's been incredible. It's also been really cool to watch how they not only have that run game, but they have the air game through A.J. Brown, who's come back in and kind of found his way through and now playing a role in the team that is obviously really powerful. And they have a great defense. That's the other thing. Defenses win championships.
Yep.
I think we forget about that. That's where I would say the Chiefs are really threatening. The Chiefs with Spagnuolo on the defense and the crazy schemed up plays. I mean, that last one where they sent the double blitz at Josh Allen in the championship game. How do you compete with that? It's going to be really interesting. I know it's going to be tight.
Well, do you know what I find fascinating? And I kind of want to throw it back at both of you because I feel like you two are more into the NFL than I would be. Although I'm so fascinated by Saquon Barkley. I just think from what I've seen of him, he just looks like a dynamic, explosive character who very few defenses can operate against him. But in terms of if the Chiefs were to win it, which obviously would be an incredible achievement, the three-peat, but Mahomes would win it for a fourth time, is there a danger that the NFL could become boring if they're continuously winning these titles? Or is it still that we should marvel in the history that they're creating, Todd?
I think there is the case to be made for Chief fatigue. And I think the people, especially people that don't like Swift mania and Taylor Swift's inroad into the NFL, and people are just sick of that. I mean, obviously, if your team is like me, the Minnesota Vikings or the 49ers or anyone else, you're sick and tired of seeing Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and making $50 million and their girlfriend is Taylor Swift. It's like they have enough already. It's like people that live in San Diego should never win the lottery because they have enough already. The weather's perfect, everything like that. So I think there is definitely a case for that. But I think people like to see excellence. And right now, it's not like the Chiefs are doing it with smoke and mirrors or lucky calls. They are the best team. There's just no question about it until someone steps up. We've had teams like that in the past. I know people were sick and tired of the New England Patriots to the point where it was a national episode of anyone but Tom Brady. And we had a run of that with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Dallas Cowboys. There's teams like that. So I tend to root for the underdog because my team has not won a Super Bowl in 4 tries. But I don't know, Kate, what do you think? I mean, your 49ers aren't there, so you're in the same boat with me.
Like my heart says Eagles. My head says Patrick Mahomes. He cannot be beaten. And what he's doing, I think the next story is going to be, let's think about if he does win. He has got 4 Super Bowls, 3 in a row, 4 in 6 years. He's just 29. He's really on track to he's already beaten what Tom Brady did in his first 6 years.
Yeah.
Is he going to be the GOAT? I mean, Brady did it over multiple years and played into his 40s, but he took a long time between, I think, the early 2000s and it was like his 3rd or his 4th Super Bowl. There was a big gap there was a 10-year gap between those Super Bowls. He had 2 in a row, never got 3 in a row. And Mahomes is doing this and it seems easy for him. Is the conversation going to be Brady versus Mahomes? I think it will be. And if that's the case, what does it take for Mahomes to be better than Brady? And I'm going to just say this, my opinion is that what made Brady so excellent and so intriguing is that he did it at a second franchise. Mahomes, is he going to go to another franchise? Is he ever going to leave? I think he's signed to the Chiefs for like ever. Would he ever leave just to try and get that
10
tag?
years, $500 million.
There you go.
I wouldn't let him go. I wouldn't let him go.
But then if he achieves the three-peat, he's already surpassed Tom Brady in a record.
Yeah. It's a great debate. I think the build up to the Super Bowl is part of it. And I think the NFL, although it does make me just a little bit when they have what we call the mini bye. So there's no football the week before the Super Bowl. I think that's fantastic. Get the players up, but that just gives a chance for the NFL to do some more marketing, get more people. The city of New Orleans is going to absolutely be invaded with fans. I think the cheapest ticket I've seen on the internet's price right now is somewhere hovering around $2,500 to $3,000. That's just to get in the building. You may be the highest seat possible, but there are people that will pay it.
Let's chat about winter sports now. In a year's time, we will be talking about the start of the Winter Olympics in Milan Cortina. And this is a hugely important year, the lead-up year to the Winter Olympics for all those winter athletes. They want to get their qualifications in. They want to prove that they can be on the big stage. And most countries have limited places. You have to qualify. Certain events require a certain time and so on. So this is the year to do it, guys. Starting off in February, we have the 9th Asian Winter Games, which takes place from the 7th to the 4th of February in China. They were the sole bidder for the games this year. Ski mountaineering will be held for the first time at the Asian Winter Games, while ski jumping has been dropped. And ski mountaineering is a really cool sport. I have dabbled in an element of it. It is basically a form of backcountry skiing. If you love to backcountry ski, it brings that element into it with mapping and finding your way around the hills. So if you like getting off-piste, this is one for you, Todd. I know you love that, getting your straps off your snowboard and having to dig a little bit. Also, Bhutan, Cambodia, Saudi Arabia, they're all scheduled to make their debut, while Afghanistan and Bahrain are returning after missing the last edition in 2017. Japan topped the medal table last time out, 27 golds as part of the 74 medals in total. So look out for them. They're going to be big in the Asian Winter Games. That's not the biggest one on the Australian calendar, though, for winter athletes. And it might surprise you, we do have winter athletes. We don't have too much snow. We do have a little bit, but most of our slopes are covered in rocks. It means we're very good at mogul skiing, and that is exactly what I'm going to talk about. Mogul skiing, our biggest event in mogul skiing on the World Cup circuit, is coming right up. It's over near you, Todd. It's in Utah at Deer Valley. It has been called and referred to me as the Super Bowl for Australian mogul skiing because we always do well. And I don't know if you know, there's an Olympic gold medalist by the name of Jakara Anthony. She won the Olympic gold in moguls. She's going to Deer Valley. She's won there a couple of times. And actually in 2023, she and a fellow called Matt Graham, 2 Australians, beat all the rest of the world and took home gold in the moguls. So look out for them in Utah. And just recently, the X Games in Aspen, Scotty James went and took home a 4-peat on the half pipe, beating anyone else's record. There was a little known, I think there was an American that once ruled the half pipe. I don't know what his name. He's faded
into the Flying Tomato.
We could probably, Todd, you might know him, a Flying Tomato.
Little Shaun White action. Hey, Scotty James, I'm telling you what, he is one of the funnest snowboarders. I don't want to hijack your stuff real quick, but he is one of the best snowboarders to watch because he's not small. And right now, some of the best snowboarders in halfpipe are Japanese Americans, kids that are coming in around 5'9" to 5'11". Scotty James checks in as a tall Aussie at like 6'2", 6'3". He wears his trademark boxing red gloves, and he's coming off a win not only at the X Games, but before that, he won the big event in Lach, Switzerland. So Scotty James right now is on a tear, and I'd have to say he is the odds-on favorite to win the gold medal in just over a year's time in Milan Cortina.
Yeah, I mean, Scotty James, he's always been up against Shaun White, so it really is his chance to get the gold this time. But you know who else is chasing him? There's another Aussie guy, Val Guselli. He is coming through. He was in the final last season, and he is absolutely rocking the half pipe. He's a young guy too, teenager. He'll be coming up just as Scotty James is ready to take the crown from Shaun White. So it's going to be an interesting battle there. Natalie, what's happening in Europe for the ski scene?
Yeah, we are obviously really looking forward to the 47th Alpine World Ski Championships, which will be underway in Austria. It's an event that's been running, for nearly 100 years since the first event back in 1931. And it sees 5 disciplines for each of the men and women, as well as a mixed team parallel event. There's also the combined team event, which is making its senior debut in Saalbach ahead of these Winter Olympics, which it's being introduced into in 2026. It involves teams of 2 athletes of the same gender, one competing in the downhill and the other in the slalom. It's the first time we're back at the Saalbach, since 1991. All the races then will be on a single mountain, and that's over 600 sportsmen and women from over 70 countries, thousands and thousands of spectators really intrigued about this one. And it's interesting listening into you, Kate, talking about the Australian talents. I sort of think where we are situated here in Great Britain, we're kind of like in this climate of, we're not that snowy, but I mean, there can be a lot of snow up in Scotland, of course. But in general, here in London, especially when it was really cold at one stage early on in this start of this year, there was barely a snowflake. But we do have the largest contingent ever going out to the World Championships of British talent, including Dave Riding, who is meant to be the best British skier of all time. So, there's a lot of interest in terms of Britain and gearing up and maybe laying down a marker for those Winter Olympics as well. But there are a lot of obviously massive talent that we should talk about. Mikaela Shiffrin, of course, one of the most exciting skiers, most successful in the modern era, both in the men's and women's. 2-time Olympic gold medalist. She's a 5-time overall world champion, a 4-time world champion in the slalom, an 8-time winner of the World Cup discipline. And she's also won 14 medals at the World Championships, 7 of which have been gold. And this is her 7th World Championship. Only just returning to competition after an abdominal injury, a puncture, in fact, which is just ridiculous. 2 months ago, sidelined.
She is amazing, isn't she? Like, I don't know about you, Todd, but she's my favorite athlete to watch right now. I'm putting it out there. Mikaela, if you're tuning in, please come and join us on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
You're injured right now. We'll have a chat. I'm sure it'll help you feel better. She's amazing, and chasing down Lindsey Vonn, the GOAT, and now Lindsey Vonn coming back, and those two battling. But mostly for Mikaela, and for what I've seen, she copped a lot of criticism, Todd, and the US media can be really harsh when their favorite athlete doesn't do well at an Olympics. And when she had the opportunity to win at the Olympics, she crashed out a couple of times, right? And she seems to have come back from that and performed and is still, crushing it. Mentally, she's done a lot of work. And I think that is just so impressive. The amount of criticism she dealt with is unbelievable. And to come back, incredible.
The amount of stuff she puts up with on a daily basis is amazing. And she has had a lot of battles, a lot of tumultuous stuff going on in her life. Obviously losing her father, the biggest one of all. But when you heap so much pressure on an athlete before the Olympics, and that's kind of what comes with it when you're the odds-on favorite to walk away with, 3, 4, 5 gold medals, you become the media darling or whatever network is covering that. And I remember being a part of NBC, how much she was a part of NBC's promotion. And so when she didn't live up to what we thought she would do, a lot of people were like, oh, she failed. Folks, she didn't fail. She's still at the Olympics going up against the best in the world. Wasn't her day. It happens to all the greats. So I'm so looking forward to her coming back in Milan Cortina. You talk about the injury, the abdominal puncture. That is brutal. But I do want to turn my attention really quickly to Lindsey Vonn. She is coming back after being away for 6 years. Kate, I know you had an injury. You were off the slopes. You're dealing with the ACL tear. That's going to keep you off the slopes for about a year. Can you imagine doing that 6 years and then coming back to the world class of that skiing level? And that to me is just amazing.
Well, she's blown out her knee 4 times, Todd.
Yeah.
She's got metal plates all through it. It's not even she's mostly kind of inhuman. She's an
bionic woman.
Yeah, exactly that.
She's an alien the way she performs, isn't she? And just the mentality to come back, just a competitor. You know, I really love watching competitors, and I think that's what I love about Lindsey Vonn. She's so determined and so committed to her craft. Ski racing, it's tough. You know, they're going hundreds of kilometers an hour down really icy runs. I was actually there in Beaver Creek where they ran the recent World Cup event. I was there last year when I had my broken knee, so I wasn't skiing. But I saw them watering with a hose the slope. And I was like, what are you doing? That's going to make it sheet ice. That's sheet ice, right? Usually they like the fresh snow and they groom it, they water it. And they said, this is exactly what we want. We want it icy. We want it fast and hard, and people are going to crash out, and great. It's going to make it more fast, more exciting. And that, to me, just sold me, ski racing in an instant. And it told me I'm not cut out for that. I'll go off piste, but I'm certainly not doing that.
But when you've got Lindsey Vonn, what is she, 40 years old? I mean, again, we've talked in previous podcasts about the maturing athletes who are just able, even though 6 years out of retirement, coming back, just being able to get back into competing at the highest level is so incredible at that age. I wanted to also bring you up to speed with the Albanian Lara Kulturi, who is just 18 years old. She made her debut at the World Cup at 16, the youngest ever debutant. I mean, obviously lots of excitement in Albania, no doubt, for her, where she, at just 18 years old, has already been on 3 podium finishes. So this is someone to look out for, just the extremes of the 40-year-old Lindsey Vonn and then an 18-year-old as well. And we shouldn't forget Marco Odermatt, of course, of Switzerland, who's looking as the favourite to come away with a number of golds at Saalbach. He's won gold already at the Beijing Winter Olympics, of course. He's also a 2-time defending champion in the World Championships. He's certainly a male skier to look out for in this competition.
Hey, but Natalie, let's talk about the Canadian Cowboys. I mean, give it up for James Crawford and Cameron Alexander. They used to be called back in the day, and Kate will remember this, they used to be called the Crazy Canucks, and now they've changed their name to the Canadian Cowboys. And I'm telling you, from freestyle to alpine, Canadians do not mess around. They say it's hockey is their national sport. I disagree. It's skiing and snowboarding. They bring the heat in both the men's and the women's side.
Oh, absolutely. How fun are they, the Canucks? Also, Nat, just on your comment about the 18-year-old, Jakara Anthony, the mogul skier I talked to you about, she debuted at 16. So, incredible, and she's already won multiple Crystal Globes, which is the overall cup trophy for winning the World Cup circuit. So, yeah, we can do a little bit of skiing down under. There's not too much snow, but we can do it.
Hey, but let's not forget Brazil also has a chance to get a medal. I said that right. A skiing medal with Lucas Pinheiro Braten. Now, this guy was born in Norway, but representing Brazil, and it could get Brazil their first medal at the World Championships. How great of a story would that be? A Brazilian winning an alpine ski medal.
There's going to be a documentary. Are we making a movie? Can the Sporting Planet now shift into movie? It's going to be the next.
Cool Runnings Part 2.
Forget the Cool Runnings Jamaican bobsled team. We want the Brazilian skier.
So we've been talking about differing climates, and that is one of the reasons given as to why the England women's team have performed so badly at the Ashes down under where you are, Kate. I mean, I really don't want to talk about it, but you have your time to gloat in just a moment. The reason I mentioned the climate is the England head coach, John Lewis, has basically said that it's the lifestyle is so different from England to what it is in Australia, for example, that people can go out swimming every day and enjoy themselves and be athletic and be so healthy. It's not the same here in England. We clearly can't win at anything because our climate and our lifestyles are so bad. That's one of the reasons he's given anyway. It was over, I think, in the first T20. So, yeah, Kate, tell us how happy everybody is in Australia.
Well, look, jubilant would be a word I'd probably use. Look, I'll just read you some of the headlines that have been published in our press that I've just collected.
Just happens to have them handy.
It just happens to have them. Australia smashes dismal England. England annihilated as Australia dominate women's Ashes. Wow. Pretty straight down the line. England... Ashes domination continues as England slumps to humiliating 10-year low. Well, And then finally, the Australian spinner Sophie Molyneux has said the idea of a whitewash is really appealing. And it is appealing. You know what, guys? I love a whitewash. There's been some great moments as well. I don't know if you guys saw that catch by Ash Gardner. She was running out of bounds. It was going to be a 6. She pulled it back in with one hand, jumped over the rope, came back into the ground, and then caught it with the other hand. Incredible stuff. And that sort of athleticism, I guess, goes to what your coach is saying, Nat. We are more athletic down here. We do like being out in the sun, and we do like to gloat just a little bit too. But it was a funny thing to say. He said that the Australians look more faster and more powerful, more agile, because he did a walk from Bondi to Coogee, and he saw all the kids out surfing and bodyboarding and doing surf lifesaving, which has caused quite a stir here. I think a lot of our media loved that and took it into various situations. In fact, commentators on our Big Bash League in the men's game were commenting that one of the players who made a particularly nice move it must have been a product of the Bondi lifestyle, the athleticism and agility that just grows up in the eastern suburbs. And as an eastern suburbs resident myself in Sydney, I appreciate it. I don't know, is there any, I think, like, jokes aside, is there anything to be said about a culture that does have access to beaches, open space, a lot of great weather, rarely gets too cold, rarely gets too hot to play sport, and a lifestyle that does, I see it on the weekends in the morning, people do go out running to meet and have coffee. Is that really such an impact? People run in London, don't they? Do they?
Yeah, they do. Of course we do. Listen, just to say that the climate is the reason why, a team might be losing isn't fair, really, from what John Lewis was saying. The weather does play its part, and you can, if it's raining or if it's grey, if it's really cold, there's a reason why you don't want to go out. You might say, I'm just going to Netflix and chill today. I don't need to go out. I think it does help when you can go out and have that wonderful climate and have that wonderful sea all around you. We're in London, we're a built up city. Yeah, we've got the River Thames, but it's a bit murky. No one wants to swim in that.
That didn't go well in Paris for the marathon. So
exactly that. In some ways, look, there's no great shame in losing to Australia, because Australia are the best of the best. Of course they are. I think people just expected it to be a little bit tighter. And also, I think they changed the format of it, because if I remember rightly, the last time it was the test match that was played first, and Australia won that, which gave them a 4-point advantage, which was quite insurmountable, because obviously England didn't win. So they changed it thinking, well, because this is 1 and 2 in the ODI rankings, that maybe it'll be a slightly closer affair. Boy, they got that wrong as well. But yeah, it's a massive learning experience.
But really, let's break it down. What is going on with women's cricket in England? England is the birthplace of cricket. Really, you have far more people, far more women in the country than we do. What's going on with the cricket program? Why is it so bad?
I think we've just been a bit slow on the uptake. It's only in the recent years that they've become professional. And that's similar with the women's football. Let's not forget the WSL's massive over here now, and they're all now getting rewarded by full-time contracts. They no longer have to work a second job, which so many of our football players and no doubt cricketers have had to do. I think it's just been slow behind the 8 ball, really, unfortunately, for cricket over here, despite, as you say, being the birthplace of it. Maybe there's a little bit of thinking, oh, well, as you say, we came up with cricket, so we should be the best at it, but not actually going down the route of properly developing our players, our youngsters, making sure they're as good a standard as they should be. Now we brought in the 100 competition. Now we're seeing a mixture of teams, and maybe that will help with the franchises and bringing in more sponsorships. Things like that will help to improve. But I also think it doesn't help when we've got our coach coming up with strange excuses, the captain at one point saying she doesn't even know why they've lost. They can't even come up with the reasons as to why they've been so below par. And when former England cricketers like Alex Hartley has been critical in the past by saying that their fitness levels perhaps aren't at their best, she didn't single anybody out, but they don't like that criticism. They've been shunning her when she's tried to speak to them in her media work that she does, some of those players anyway. Sometimes you just got to front up and say, we're just not good enough, and we've got to go back to the drawing board. But look, there will no doubt be a debrief of what happens with this Ashes series. I'm sure once it all comes to an end. A similar inquest is already underway in India's men's cricket, particularly after the side's defeat to Australia. God, another win for Australia. In the Border Gavaskar Trophy, that was over the Christmas and New Year period. They're playing England in a white ball series at the moment, but with the Champions Trophy just around the corner and a big summer ahead, there's a sense that something needs to change. And this has led to those in charge of the Indian cricket team coming up with a 10-point set of guidelines for international cricketers to follow. Well, I've been catching up with the broadcaster and former cricketer Sohail Chandok to find out exactly what's been going on.
I think it's safe to say there is some sense of disharmony. Like I said, I used the word turmoil earlier because it seemed to be such a stable side. I think India was the unbeatable force over the last few years in every format. England were over. I worked on that test series here where, I hate to remind you, it was a 4-1 drubbing, if I may say so, in India. And it was an amazing series, a lot of sportsman spirit. The team seemed to just be coming together so well under Rohit Sharma, who's such a loved character, I think, in amongst the players as well. So to see the complete U-turn over the course of just one series in Australia, and albeit in very difficult conditions for a young team that's touring, I think we've kind of gotten ahead of ourselves, seen some crazy things happen in the last tour of Australia, and maybe gotten away with that as well. So the expectations being so high on what is essentially a young Indian unit, I think it's now become about how much excess baggage you can carry, the duration that wives and girlfriends can stay, who's going to be traveling by what airline, and whether everyone's going to stay in training together. Now, look, I think a lot of this actually needed to happen a lot long ago. But given that things were allowed to move a certain direction, it's now suddenly completely gone into a U-turn of domestic cricket versus non-domestic cricket, and a whole lot more. So I'm sure we'll dive into a few nitty-gritties as well.
Yeah, we will. Like you said, this all stems from that 3-1 series defeat to Australia in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. Having won the first test as well, it all looked like it was setting up for a good stage for India, I should say. But Australia came through to win in the end, as I've mentioned. That came about after the New Zealand defeat at home for India, which was a 3-0 whitewash. And now we've had this review that you've sort of touched on there by the Board of Control of Cricket in India, which has set out these new 10-point guidelines. Some might look at these sort of new ideas, these new stances that they brought in as maybe a bit of an overreaction. But some of the things that they've asked for example, is, as you say, players should not travel separately. They cannot leave practice sessions or tours early, and contracted players have to play domestic cricket. There's also a limit, and you sort of touched on it earlier on, with the wives and girlfriends and families on how long they can visit a touring India party, for example. Is it an overreaction, or is this needed?
Look, I think some of it was needed earlier itself. I think this is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction given the 10-point sort of bullets. But I played a lot of cricket in Australia for about 5 years, and a lot of guys who were playing for Australia back then were still playing A-grade cricket, right? I think when you now think back to what Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli have done, I don't think Virat's played a domestic game in about 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. I think Rohit Sharma pretty similar. So I don't think there's a lot that's wrong about that. I think the cohesiveness in terms of turning up to training at the same time, leaving at the same time, I mean, for most teams, these are pretty much a given. And, I think, most teams will look at this and say, hang on, why was it not there in the first place? And I think there is a lot of head scratching going on from people I've spoken to, from people outside of India that have called me and said, so what is actually going on? Because were they staying in separate hotels earlier? Was a certain player not allowed to train separately? So suddenly now it's all brought to light, things that were perhaps going on but weren't necessarily needed to be publicly revealed. So I think it's now brought a lot of stuff under the scanner that should just remain within the team unit. And you know what it's like when a paper has been leaked or a team meeting's been leaked. It happens during the Ashes famously as well. It causes a bit of a rift within the team. And I think this is just a bit of poor timing in terms of all of it coming together, because it also makes it seem like more of a knee-jerk reaction, even though I think a lot of these processes are for the right reason, playing Ranji Trophy cricket, giving a bit more credence to domestic cricket and things like that. So yes and no in terms of knee-jerk versus needed. But yeah, look, I think there's a lot to digest, that's all.
Is there, though, a superstar culture then in the Indian cricket team? Is it a them and us scenario that perhaps we haven't all been privy to?
I think there is. Look, I'd be lying if I said there isn't, and I think everyone knows it. There are certain characters of the team that bind a team together, though, and I think Rohit Sharma is at the helm of that. Everyone I've spoken to through that Test series, before that, after that, I've worked on the IPL now for close to a decade, thankfully, and seen, the reason why Rohit has won as many IPL titles as he has, the reason why he's led a team to a T20 World Cup trophy, Test matches. And whenever you talk to the younger players, they always say, Rohit Bhai always makes us express ourselves. He really brings us in together. And I think there's a sense of togetherness under Rohit Sharma. So while India as such is a superstar chasing culture, and I don't mean just from a cricket perspective, right? There's a reason why cricket and Bollywood rule India in many ways. India longed for heroes, longed for icons. And I keep saying we've got a long way to go before we become a true sporting nation, because quite often we don't go to watch sport, we go to watch the sporting icons. And therefore, there is this hero culture that we're chasing. So I think when you've lived on a pedestal for that long, when you are also trying to shy away from the public eye, it's hard. It's a hard life to constantly be chased by paparazzi or chased by fans and people literally wanting to touch you and get a feel of a Virat Kohli or a Rohit Sharma. So, look, a lot of this comes down to bringing parity back and putting everyone on the same stature as such, and kind of making sure that a guy who's playing his first ODI or first T20 feels, at least in the dressing room, like he's the same as a guy who's played 2 World Cups or 4 World Cups.
Well, if you want to hear more from that interview with Sohail, then head over to our This Sporting Planet YouTube channel, where we talk more about the new Indian guidelines and much more as well. It'll be great to get your reaction then to what has emerged from that defeat to Australia, stemming also from the New Zealand defeat at home for India. These guidelines that they've put in place, I mean, I was reading through them and I found them absolutely fascinating, because the whole way through I kept thinking, how have they allowed this to happen? Why have they got to this stage where players previously were traveling separately to tours or to venues, for example? I mean, it just, there's no team ethic there if you're allowing players to do that. Some players were allowed to leave practice sessions early, for example. There are some that we can debate whether or not they seem fair, but just those first 2 points, and I still scratch my head as to thinking how they've allowed that to happen. Maybe it's because, Kate, they have a superstar culture within the Indian team where there are some that are just these heroes that have been allowed to get away with this behavior.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, isn't it? I mean, I was reading these guidelines, I had exactly the same reaction as you. Get on the team bus, travel with the team, don't leave practice early. This sounds just like what every other team would be doing. And the Indian cricket, I mean, they're paid multi-millions of dollars. If they're not getting on the team bus and they're leaving practice early, what are we paying them for? One of the others I found really interesting was you can't bring your own personal staff with you, because you're bringing a masseuse. They're not enough there's probably a few physios, right? Maybe one less massage in a day on your travel team. It's crazy. And if that's not already happening, absolutely, it's going to cause culture problems. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Nat. If you've got the stars that are bigger than the team, that's when things break down, especially in a team like cricket, where everyone has to be out there for such long days and getting along. Hopefully, they're on tours that go for months on end. It's clearly something's breaking down there, and people leaving practice early, come on. I mean, get with the program. It's 2025 now. And we need to be acting like professionals that are being paid multi-millions of dollars.
Can I say this and just add the Kobe Bryant quote on that? There is no I in team, but there is an ME. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the players there are starting to lead on the ME. I think it just goes back to kind of what Kate was saying. This will tear down a team. I think in the NFL, they talk about building a culture. And it's a culture of team, which Kansas City has done. It's a culture of team, the team before me. And you start to get these little inroads of people saying, I'm kind of bigger than the team. I need this, I need this. And that's where the crumbling starts.
I mean, Kate, you also touched on it, that some of these tours are ridiculously long. I think cricketers are away from home much more often than they are at home when it comes to the international stars. You're talking months, as you say, as well. And they've said that for tours longer than 45 days, families are allowed to visit for only 2 weeks of that tour. Now, there's a part of me that did think some of these guidelines were a little over the top, because there are some players that might need to have their families around. Now, we've got to accept that some players are professional enough to do the job at hand, but also can see their families and have the distractions as long as they perform their duties. So they're turning up for training, they're doing their media duties, they're doing all the team talks, etc. I think sort of banning the families for a lengthy period of time might be a little harsh. And also, if I was one of those family members, I'd be thinking, don't be blaming me. You didn't lose this series because I turned up, for example. But the other good thing I did think was, though, one of the guidelines is saying that the international players should be competing in the domestic cup competitions, and in particular the Ranji Trophy. And I think that's always a good thing anyway, when you can have some of the younger players coming through, playing alongside the likes of Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma and Jasprit Bumrah, for example. That's only going to help strengthen the Indian team in the long run, you'd like to think. I did question, and as I say, you can hear more of this on our YouTube channel, I did question Sohail about the standard of the Ranji Trophy and whether that's good enough for those international players to play in. Are they going to benefit themselves from that? But it still makes sense to me that you should be required to play a minimum amount. There were talks of, if they don't follow these guidelines, there'll be bans in place and they might be banned from playing in the IPL. I'm not sure they'll ever get to that stage, because I think, how can you really cut some of those star players from the IPL? But interesting nonetheless, they've gone down this route. It does seem as though they've gone nuclear on this one.
Yeah, and I think I always come back to the good teams that are doing it right and winning a lot, okay? So I just think of like the New Zealand rugby team, the All Blacks. There's a video of them on Instagram just recently. It came up on my feed again and reminded me, one of the things they would always do is sweep out the locker rooms once they were done, wherever they were. Maybe they'd won the World Cup, whatever they were doing, they would be sweeping out the locker room, not leaving it to any of the cleaners. Nothing was beneath them. And so that we, not me mentality really came through, and it was clearly part of their whole thing and really part of their success. And I think that's a theme in every team that's very successful over a long period of time. It's a we, not me attitude. And I think about, the Patriots, they would have had that. Tom Brady was never bigger than the team. It's a whole range of examples. And when players become bigger than the team, like it seems to be happening, that's toxic, and the culture really needs to be shifted in the Indian cricket.
All right, it's that time of the show where we bring you A.O.B. And I'm going to start with the Six Nations, if you don't mind, which is underway and runs through until March. I'm going to quickly run you through all the teams, just to remind everybody who's involved and the sort of state of play of how they all are. Ireland, looking to defend their title, achieved the Three-Peat. Gosh, that's a common theme of late. No team in Six Nations history has ever won it 3 times in a row. Standing in their way, of course, are 5 other teams. England, who are the most successful side in Six Nations history, winning it 7 times, but their last title came 5 years ago, and since then they've not finished any higher than 3rd. France were the runners-up of last year. They are boosted by the return of their captain, Antoine Dupont. Many say he is the factor that could lead to them winning this Six Nations. He missed last year as he was focusing on Sevens rugby and the Olympics, which worked out for France because they came away with gold in Paris. Scotland have never finished higher than 3rd in the tournament, but they are a bogey side for England, for example, because they've won the Calcutta Cup, the trophy that is awarded to the winner of that particular match the last 4 occasions. They'll be looking to improve this time around. Wales, well, they'll certainly want to fare better than last year when they finished with the wooden spoon. They ended 2024 losing every game as well. And as for Italy, well, they celebrate 25 years of being in the Six Nations. Last year they finished 5th, but they had their best ever performance when it comes to results, having lost just twice. Can they build on that? Ireland, for many, are very much the favourites we should win, but an interesting factor going into this one, their usual head coach, Andy Farrell, isn't part of their team this time around because he's on a secondment for the British and Irish Lions tour. So the defence coach, Simon Easterby, will take over the Irish reins. And even though he's been involved in their setup for a long time, there's an element of the unknown, perhaps without Farrell.
And it's never too soon to talk about the chase for Lord Stanley's Cup. And this year, a team north of the border may be hoisting that trophy. 3 Canadian teams are looking on point this season. You've got Toronto, Edmonton, led by the best player in the league, Connor McDavid, and surprise, surprise, Winnipeg also How about the new team in Utah playing this season simply as the Utah Hockey Club? I hope they can get the name Yetis for their mascot, but the word is that name may be shot down by the patent office. So it could be still the Utah Mammoths, the Utah Wasatch, or the Utah Hockey Club. But I think it's worth noting, it has been a long time. I think you go back to 1993 since a Canadian team won Lord Stanley's Cup.
In other news, the World Surf League started today. It's Pipeline back on. And of course, the first stop on tour is the most iconic. Last year, it really made headlines, you guys, as the women absolutely dominated for the first time ever. So the history of Pipeline is that women have not been allowed to surf this wave. It's deemed too difficult, too hard, too dangerous. And it's only recently that they've just started being allowed to surf it. But never before last year were they called on the heats during the biggest swells. And last year they were, and the women absolutely crushed it. An 18-year-old called Katie Simmers, American. Todd, you might have heard of her. Keep an eye on her.
Yes.
She won it last year. She's looking to come back and win it again. She obviously won the whole world title in the whole season last year, and she is going to be facing off against another young gun, Australian Molly Picklum. Watch those two; they're going to be incredible. And I think the biggest news from that last year went viral everywhere was when Simmers did win it, and in her post-heat interview in the water, given all of the history and everything that had gone on with women, she had a memorable quote, and she said, "Pipeline is for the effing girls," and she used the real word, guys. So let's look out for those two. I can't wait to see what Simmers does, and certainly Molly Picklum, she's got my money as one to watch.
So that's it for A.O.B. But before we finish, we just wanted to take a moment to say all our thoughts here at This Sporting Planet are with those involved and affected by the crash between a commercial flight from Wichita, Kansas, and a helicopter in Washington, D.C. on January 29th. They are gone, but not forgotten.
Thanks so much for listening and being part of our This Sporting Planet tribe. Make sure you subscribe to the show via your favourite podcast provider and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And please do leave us a review as well.
We'll be back at the end of the month reviewing all of February's action and looking ahead to March as the new F1 season gets underway. Major League Baseball heads to Tokyo and the Players' Championship takes place in Florida.
Make sure to check us out on socials. Just search for This Sporting Planet. And a reminder, we're on YouTube too, so you can watch every episode. Until then, for Natalie, Kate, myself, and the whole This Sporting Planet team, thanks for listening.